and welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce, and it has been busy. In fact, it's almost hard to believe, all of this, and it's just 1 week? You know, somewhere in the world the sun is shining, somewhere else it's raining. Somewhere there are people at peace, but every day it seems as though there are threats to our very existence, whether from Mother Nature or something else. Last week, and even before last week's show was fully uploaded, the town of Mocoa in Colombia was hit with flooding, mudslides. The rain began on Friday and came down, avalanche of mud and water, burying hundreds of people as they slept. On Monday, St. Petersburg, the one in Russia, not Florida, a terrorist set off a bomb on a commuter train. That killed over a dozen, and dozens more injured. Perpetrator, 22-year-old Russian national who was born in Kyrgyzstan. The next day brought more agony, different way. 6 years of fighting in Syria between President Assad's government forces and the rebels. Dozens of people died a horrible death by poison gas. Now, that's a bit of a conundrum because the U.S. has blamed Assad, but the government denies it. But the Russians condemn the attack, but don't accept that it was Assad's doing. And it is true that under the terms of the deal worked out in 2013, Syria was supposed to have turned over their poison gas to Russia. So where did it originate? Donald Trump thinks it was Assad, so on Thursday, the U.S. fired 59 cruise missiles into Syria. So now Russia is sending a frigate into the area, and they've got cruise missiles of their own. Remember, Syria and Iran are clients of Russia. Stay tuned. All right, meanwhile, here in the States, squall lines, thunderstorms, tornadoes, that's a sure sign of spring every year, and we got them on Wednesday and Thursday with a vengeance. Georgia and South Carolina, particularly hard hit. In Columbia, the one in South Carolina, not the country cited earlier, in Columbia, the streets were flooded. Rain came down for a while, 2 inches an hour, and that's a lot of rain. The difference between the streets flooding on Wednesday and the flooding of a year and a half ago, when the floods were biblical proportions, much of the state. A year and a half ago, it rained hard like that, but for days and days. Then on Friday, a truck was driven into a department store in Stockholm, killing at least 4. All of this in a week. And in the days and weeks ahead, we can expect more. More what? Well, flooding, bombing, cruise missiles, hijacked trucks. We humans have to be among the strangest species to exist in this or any other universe. We can create wondrous images, breathtakingly beautiful music, art, poetry. We can string together words that inspire full measure of devotion and cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal. And yet we can't seem to get past the hate. We kill each other crudely, as with the truck, or cruelly, as with the poison gas, or ever more efficiently, as with drones and cruise missiles. We seem to have this need to exterminate one another. It might be worth noting that Thursday, April 6th, marked 100 years since the U.S. Congress declared war, and we entered what became known later as World War I. You know, geese mourn, elephants mourn, maybe dolphins do, whales, maybe a few other species, but as far as we know, we are the only species to not only mourn the death of those we love, but to contemplate in the abstract known as the future. We can contemplate our own mortality, our taking leave of this existence. So who's better off, a goldfish who doesn't mourn, doesn't contemplate mortality, or we humans? We can know great achievement, we can know great joy, but we can also have our hearts so broken so thoroughly. We humans, I think we're the only species that can overcome the universal emotion of self-preservation. When you hurt enough, leaving life behind has appeal. So, goldfish? Human? I'm not smart enough to be absolutely certain of the answer. All right, in the local newspaper one day this week came this message from the publisher. News and Record makes changes to the way the paper is organized. Beginning today, we will change the way we organize sections and features in the news and record. The paper will be a bit smaller most days, and we are eliminating some features, he goes on to explain, in ways that defy real comprehension. It'll be this on Monday, and it'll be this on Thursday, it'll be something else on Tuesday, while Wednesdays will... Yeah, I could study it and learn all of the ins and outs, but right now it's as understandable as if you were an expert bridge player, and I don't play it, and you just ran through the rules real quick. Huh? What did you say? That's what this reads. Honestly, this reads like a handbook for a secret society, and once memorized, it would need to be burned. The bottom line is this: they're not reducing the price, but they are reducing content. On Mondays, for example, there will be no more editorials. What? Well, that means they don't have to pay any columnist for editorials on Monday. All right, so we all know that print media has suffered advertising loss, but I think they are making the same mistake that other companies and other industries have made. In order to try and shore up profits, they are reducing their investment in their product. No editorials on Monday. Will I cancel? Maybe. Maybe not. But if not, if I become accustomed to no editorials on Monday, maybe they'll take them out on Friday, and so on. I still read the comics. I work the puzzles. The comics are annoying in this newspaper. They have few good ones. Most of the ones they print you've never heard of. They can be had for a lower price. I mean, they don't even run Doonesbury. I've seen the mistake before. Back when the U.S. had the big three automakers, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, easily the smallest was Chrysler. Now, in many ways, their cars were superior. They offered gauges instead of idiot lights. The hoods were held up by springs instead of rods. Little things, but for a while their designers made some really ugly cars. Fewer people bought them. Lower profits. So they made smaller investment in the product. The carpets were cut a little smaller. You know, the floor was not covered fully. It doesn't show, but it's noisier in the cabin. Thinner plastics were used. And the public caught on. The cars got worse, so even fewer of them were purchased. It's a death spiral. You want to save your business? Even if you have to borrow, make your product better. You'll profit less per unit, whether it's vehicle or newspaper sold. You may, for a while, sell at a loss, but when word gets out that you have value, you will have more customers. So, paper's doing away with some features, articles, and oh yeah, they're reducing the workforce too. So, as it is, I'm barely keeping my subscription. This might put me past the tipping point.
Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came and it stayed. For years I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too.
All right, welcome back. Remember, you can write to us at the Bruce Channel at yahoo.com, and you can watch all of our previous episodes at tinyurl.com/Bruce Channel or at our Facebook page. All right, so I learned something this week. I guess that makes the week a success. Do you remember this?
Today we're going to repot mandrakes.
It's also quite dangerous. The mandrake's cry is fatal to anyone who hears it.
Flaps tight down and watch me closely. You grasp your mandrake firmly, you pull it sharply out of the pot.
Well, up until this week, I thought that was just a thing, a J.K. Rowling creation. Turns out mandrakes actually exist. And as Hermione said, they're also known as Mandragora. And that little guy pulled out of that was only slightly enhanced to make him look alive. That's a lot what they look like, some more than others. These especially have had a little bit of artwork, but there you go. And while they may not help awaken people who have been petrified, they apparently do have pain-relieving qualities, and as such have been used as an anesthetic for years. And in ancient times, it really was thought that the root screams would kill those who heard it. To avoid that, Josephus of Jerusalem, who, by the way, was born about 1,980 years ago, to avoid getting screamed to death, Josephus recommends a furrow must be dug around the root until its lower part is exposed. Then a dog is tied to it, after which the person tying the dog must get away. The dog then endeavors to follow him and so easily pulls up the root, but dies suddenly instead of his master. After this, the root can be handled without fear. Somewhere in the universe, I hope, Josephus is hanging by his whatever pair you'd like to choose. All right, speaking of cats. All right, we weren't, but we were speaking of dogs. And so pets, and we all went to the vet this week. Front end of this story. I've had dogs. I've been around dogs my whole life, and dogs are great, and they don't offer me much surprise. But, you know, it was over a year ago now that I first fed the calico cat on a brutally cold Sunday morning. I began to feed her daily, and she'd hang out for months. She'd let me come over and pet her. The big challenge was to integrate her with the dog, Katie, and having done that, I started showing her the inside of the house, and all right, she moved in last June. She and Katie are not buds, but they coexist. All 4 years that I attended, my high school won the state wrestling championship in Ohio. They'd won it previously, they've won it since. They are a state wrestling powerhouse. 1 year, I was on the wrestling team, and it may have been junior high, but we all practiced together. I never once wrestled in a match. The coach, who's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame, had 4, maybe 5 sons, both older and younger than I. Some of them won individual state championships, or they were runner-up or second runner-up. They were all my size. The JV coach's son was also my size. And the point is, since they'd all been wrestling since they were just out of the crib, it quickly became clear I was never going to wrestle in a match. I could practice, I could wear myself out. The exhaustion, that 3 minutes or so of concerted effort, is exhausting as in virtually no other sport. Nevertheless, I could practice, but I was never going to get in a match. I only bring it up because I want to offer it as a basis for credibility to this. Not since the days that I was on the wrestling team have I ever been so exhausted from anything as the wrestling match that I had. I won't have to do another one for about a year or so, but I will tell you, wrestling with the cat to try and get her into the carrier fully took 10 minutes, not 3, 10 minutes, and was a full-fledged workout. Okay, so college basketball had its big weekend, and I must say it was exciting to contemplate North Carolina versus South Carolina. They'd never gotten there before, but on Saturday the Gamecocks did keep it close, but ultimately number 1 seeded Gonzaga did prevail, as did number 1 seeded North Carolina Tar Heels, which set me up pretty good for Monday. As alluded to over the past number of weeks, I'd be fine with any number of schools winning, whether either I have a connection or my friends do. And as my pick of Gonzaga before the first game was ever played, that was purely because they are so small. It was Gonzaga's first time to the finals, and I was content with either team winning. It did stay close until the final seconds, and then it was over, and UNC won, and in winning, they took over sole possession of third place, vis-a-vis how many championships they'd won. On Monday, they won their 6th, untying them with Duke and Indiana. Kentucky's got 8, UCLA's got 11. I would also be enormously remiss if I didn't also mention and congratulate South Carolina's women's basketball team. On Sunday, they won their first championship, defeating Mississippi State. Other sports, baseball opened. My Indians opened on a 3-game win streak. It's a long way to Tipperary, and it's a long way to October, too, but certainly that was a good start. Okay, last week I talked about the Masters, which began this Thursday. On Wednesday morning, commentator Frank DeFord, what a wordsmith. He comments on sports usually, but he is a fine English wordsmith. And he opined that spring used to begin on baseball's opening day, but in his words, baseball just sort of dribbles in now. And to his point, I was shocked to learn. I talked about baseball last week. Opening day was Sunday. Cincinnati didn't play. What? Once upon a time, in deference to professional baseball's debut, it began in Cincinnati. Once upon a time, Cincinnati opened the season. Everyone else started the next day. So last Sunday, 3 games, and Cincinnati wasn't in any of them? Where go with tradition? Anyway, I guess that's why Frank DeFord said it just sort of dribbles in. And what he said, now, and I quote, spring begins tomorrow. That is the day the Masters begins. As I record this, of course, I don't know how it will end. Last week, I said Tiger Woods wouldn't be much of a factor, and I understated it. He chose not even to compete. And this is a weird streak coming up. So not since 2002, that's now 15 years, but the player ranked number 1 in the world hasn't won the Masters 15 years in a row. Tiger Woods did it in 2002, and number 1 won't do it this year either. Ranked number 1, last year's U.S. Open champion, Dustin Johnson. He's always been a good player, but he's a little bit freakish. He's like 6'6", and he's got long arms, and with the golf club, what's that, 12 feet? And that's incredible club head speed, and that's what provides distance. So he hits it way out there. But he hits it straight. So he comes in this week ranked number 1, and as many high-earning players do, he rents a house. Wednesday, he falls down the stairs. He hurt his back. Took some muscle relaxers. Thursday morning, they didn't know. It turns out he couldn't play. So another year, number 1 doesn't win the Masters. I'd said many players rent a house, not sure, wherever there's an annual tournament. But years ago, I was living in Memphis. That's when they were making Great Balls of Fire, the biopic about Jerry Lee Lewis, starring Dennis Quaid. The movie was shot in and around Memphis, and inasmuch as he was the lead and was going to be there for a couple of months, he didn't rent a house. He bought one. Truth. All right, at the start of the show, I'd mentioned the weather. South Carolina got tornadoes, and the Masters is played at the Augusta National Golf Club, and that's in Augusta, Georgia. They didn't get tornadoes, but they got some wild weather, lots of wind, big rain. Some of the players couldn't practice as much as they'd hoped, and they did not play the for fun only par 3 contest on Wednesday. And then it was windy, hugely windy on both Thursday and Friday. So cold Friday morning was weird. Some of the early players were dressed more like cross-country skiers than golfers. And I've been talking about the azaleas at the Masters, and what a disappointment. There aren't any. Not this year. I worried a few weeks ago about the deeply freezing temperatures here in South Carolina and Georgia, and that's what happened. That freeze zapped all the buds. Here where I live, where the buds hadn't come out yet, some people's azaleas are now in full bloom. Mine not so much, except this last one. But this last one, I have no idea where, if one were an azalea, how one would make such an acquisition. But I'm convinced this azalea is into recreational drug use. Either that or it's got dissociative identity disorder, split personality. See, it bloomed in December, and it's blooming again now. And it did the same thing December 2015, and then again last spring. Oh, by week's end, my spirea had its first blooms, and they will be unbelievably gorgeous in another week or 2. So, my friends in Cleveland, some of them posted, pictures 3 or 4 inches of snow this week. But take heart. All right, last word about the Masters. Did you know that you can only buy one of these, or something like it, but with that logo? You can only buy, you can't get this anywhere except at the Augusta National Golf Club. And at that, only this week. Alright, for the nth week in a row, I have more videos to show you than I have time for, but take a look at this one.
I untied my shoes.
What do you have on your hands?
Zip ties in case you ever get kidnapped and you're not gonna. So I untied my shoes.
What do you have on your hands?
Zip ties in case you ever get kidnapped and you're not gonna use handcuffs because you can fix stuff like that.
So you untied your shoelaces. You pull one shoelace through the bottom of the zip tie.
And take your other shoelace and tie them together. Oops. And you're free.
Okay, now I'm not planning on being kidnapped, and likely neither are you, as opposed to all those kidnapping victims who were planning on it, you know. Anyway, we'd need to hope that they don't put the little ties around our ankles, and we'd also have to hope that if we are kidnapped and they don't put ties around our ankles, we didn't have the bad fortune to be wearing penny loafers or Crocs. But if all those conditions are met, forewarned is forearmed, or in this case, four-legged. Speaking of Crocs, here is a cool nature pic. All right, Tulsa nightlife. Filth, gin, a slut. All right, however you intend to spend your upcoming week, tomorrow is International Safety Pin Day, so there's an idea. But however you choose to spend it, I hope your upcoming week is the best one you've ever had.